Hello everyone, I'm Captain Logan.
And I'm Brandon.
And we're here to tell you how we felt about Jobs. Brandon, this movie came out last week, but we reviewed something else last week, so we put it off, and we didn't go to anything new this week because we really wanted to see this one. Brandon especially really wanted to see this one, so we did that this week. And Brandon, tell us a little bit about Jobs.
Quick question first.
Yes, sir.
It's been out for a little bit. Are we spoilerizing this one?
No, but I wouldn't be too worried about it.
Okay.
Because basically, if you know anything about history, about you know what I mean,
yes.
about the history of this person, we can't spoil too much.
Okay.
Yeah, don't worry about it. Go ahead.
So, Jobs. This is the story of Steve Jobs, founder of Apple Computer. This movie starts actually sometime in the recent past, before jumping right into the very beginning of Jobs' career, if you will.
Yeah.
It starts out with Jobs at college, kind of a float around, didn't know what he was going to do, didn't have any sort of direction, and he gets a tip from an old professor that he'd had before. They said, you should do something. We're glad that you're here. You should actually go to some classes for this type of thing. And Jobs kind of figures out kind of where he's headed in life. He calls upon a couple of old friends to start what we now know as Apple Computer. We all know it started in a garage. It follows the story of Apple starting from the garage to Jobs leaving the company to Jobs coming back to the company. I felt like maybe I can change the world with my ideas too, but still have friends later.
Okay, so you found this an inspirational film then?
Well, on a couple of levels, I'm very torn about this movie.
Okay, go ahead.
I want to say that this movie gave me a lot of what I wanted, but it left me wanting so much more.
I can totally see that. Yeah.
There were some major things. There was a montage in this movie that cut out quite a bit because it was montaging.
Yeah.
I wanted more of Steve Jobs' life, and I got more in this of the history of Apple Computer than I got of Steve Jobs' life, which really surprised me. I did get a fair play of Steve Jobs the person. I knew a lot about Steve Jobs the person beforehand because he's one of those people that has interested me greatly. Him and Bill Gates, that sounds obvious, but they really have been just kind of, with what I'm interested in, this has been a really fair game for what I've looked into history-wise. It's no Pirates of Silicon Valley for me. That movie I really enjoyed. I need to go back and rewatch it.
I've never seen that.
From a historical standpoint, I really enjoyed that.
When was that made?
I couldn't tell you. I want to say late 80s, but I'm not.
Okay,
don't quote me
never
on
seen that
at all. This movie, it had a lot of a good narrative, I felt, through the characters themselves. Not necessarily in the narration standpoint, but the characters themselves are what drive this story. This is a story about a real man and the real people he was surrounded with. And
so when you say not narratively but more character-wise, do you mean that it jumps around too much?
No, I mean the story is driven by the characters,
right,
not
sure.
by a narration, if you will.
Yeah.
And maybe I'm not saying that perfectly right, but that...
No, I got you. Good.
Okay, so anyway, the characters really drive the story. They're real people. They're real situations. That's what fascinates me about stories like this.
Well, of course, it's based on a true story, but that doesn't mean that it couldn't wind up plot-driven.
That's true.
You're absolutely
right. This gives us insight into the inner workings of Apple and how they operated in the early days. They breezed over some things that I really wish they hadn't breezed over, particularly the introduction of the GUI, the graphics user interface. I can't remember if it's actually the Lisa or it was the Macintosh that, I believe it was the Macintosh that actually did that. When Macintosh got out there, it revolutionized just everything from the get-go, from the original. Yeah,
especially interface-wise.
Interface-wise,
right?
Well, the graphics user interface that hadn't been done yet,
right?
And there's a whole thing that they kind of breezed over, the rivalry between Bill Gates and Steve Jobs.
Yeah.
That's what Pirates of Silicon Valley is really good at doing. That's that story is basically what that is.
Well, maybe that's why they breezed over it. It's kind of been done already.
It very could well be. I wanted to see it again. I
definitely would have liked to have seen part of it. Yeah,
when it would have been nice.
I don't mean to cut into your thing, but
That's
when he's on the phone screaming at Bill Gates, I was kind of hoping that we would see Gates somewhere.
Yes, I would have too. I can understand why they may not have gone in that direction.
Just fine without it. But.
Yes, I have heard that this was given a lot of negative reviews. People didn't like it.
Oh, really? I haven't looked into the reviews at all.
Jobs is not. Let me be perfectly clear here. Jobs is not a likable character by any stretch of the imagination. As far as I know,
well, he's somewhat likable, but yeah, I like that it's not as reverential about him as I thought it was going to be.
Well. I don't know exactly what's to be reverential about when it comes to Jobs. Yes, Jobs was an incredible, Jobs had incredible foresight. He had a view into the future of what things could be.
Right.
And he had the people to back him up on it.
But let me ask you the question. When you say Steve Jobs is not a likable character, are you talking about the man or are you talking about the character in this film? I'm talking about the man. Okay, but how do you feel about the character in this film?
Interestingly enough, I feel...
because I think in the film, he's somewhat likable. And you said character, so that's why I was challenging you.
He's almost likable in the film.
Okay.
I will have to say... He draws very heavily off Steve Jobs, the man, which is what he should be doing in this instance, and he definitely did a very good job of that.
But don't you think the movie is working pretty hard to make him somewhat likable?
No.
Wow, okay. I disagree on that, because I think it's working really hard at that.
I think it's working really hard to show us just what kind of a hardline asshole Steve Jobs really was. It shows us where Steve came from, yes, and that gives him heart, but he's not likable for me. The character or the man.
All right.
I will. This is good. Because I will say that I think the movie is working hard enough to tell us this guy was an asshole. Yeah, maybe he gave us this amazing stuff. He had the foresight on this, but he was a hard line. Just he will take you down if he has to.
Okay, what's your verdict on it then?
My verdict is. They didn't give me enough in this movie. I'm not feeling it.
Wow, really? You're gonna go that far?
I'm gonna go that far.
All right. Well,
not for the movie theater.
Wow, that far, huh? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna agree with you that they didn't go as far as I would have liked them to. I think maybe I liked it a little better than you did. I'm also gonna say that I think that. It's really interesting that you thought that the film was working at making him as unlikable as a person as maybe he really was, because I thought it pulled his punches just a little bit.
Okay.
And because like the ambiance of it, the atmosphere, there is so much really reverential, here's how revolutionary this person was, especially coming from the soundtrack and that kind of thing, that it seemed more to me like it was saying, yeah, this guy made mistakes, but ultimately he was a decent person. So yeah, I don't really think that it was that it was saying this guy was a really bad. I think that it was worried that critics would and just that people watching it would say, well, you're not presenting him like the way he really was. Like, I felt like they didn't even want to go as far as they did. Like, they were kind of afraid to go that far. Yeah.
They may not have gone far enough, but I thought they did a pretty good job of showing that he was this
it was fine for me.
Man.
It's just that I could see both sides of it, and I appreciated the fact that the film gave us both sides. I sometimes liked the man and was surprised that I did. But also, and this is not a problem by any stretch of the imagination, but I think for you, is it possible that part of that is preconceptions of the man? Like you walked in having a feeling about who this person was. And then it validated some of the negative ideas you have about Steve Jobs. It definitely
validated what I thought about Steve Jobs, and I liked that. Don't get me wrong.
Absolutely.
I'm not saying
I went in without an opinion, is my point.
Right. I'm not saying I didn't like the movie because I thought Jobs was a negative character. That gave the movie credibility.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
This movie made me feel like reading up a lot more on the history of Steve Jobs, but especially the history of Apple. I had precisely the thing you did. When I left the theater, which was I don't know if this was enough of a film about the man more than it was about the company. And I'm not knocking it for that so much as saying that I wanted to know more about the company, because that's what I kept latching on to. That's what I found the most interesting. And I also kept finding the people that Steve Jobs worked with and that he screwed over, and especially the man that helped him build the company, who I related to quite a bit with his whole with his whole ideal of, I'm not in this to I'm not in this to get rich or to innovate so much as just I want to create something for myself.
Yes,
and
exactly.
I find this fun, and I find this I find this interesting, and I just want to do what I can do. And that is wonderfully illustrated at the beginning when Steve goes to him and says, "You have this fantastic idea. We must market it." And he says, "Why? Yeah. Nobody's going to want this. And even if they do, I don't care. I'm just building this for me.
Right, exactly.
It's my hobby, not my job."
I felt that the movie, on that point, let me just cut
no, go right
for a
ahead.
second.
You're fine.
It illustrated the big difference between Jobs and Wozniak.
Yeah.
That was a good selling point.
I would have liked to have seen more of Wozniak, but I don't know if there was more they could have done with him without getting outside of Steve too often.
Well, they did about as much as they could, because they had a major falling out. They had a serious falling out and they showed that very well in the movie.
Yeah.
In fact, Wozniak was actually shaken when Jobs passed away, because they'd been out of contact for so long. And Wozniak had assumed, at least from what I've read, he assumed that they would be able to patch things up sometime in the near future, and it didn't happen.
That's really sad.
It is very interesting. They had a big falling out. Wozniak, I believe, actually came back to Apple later as well, and just worked under the radar, just low-level type things.
Obviously, I knew who Steve Jobs was. I knew things about the man. I grew up using Apple, and the thing that that really resonated with me the most in this was getting to go back and experience that period, that early stuff, 1974 into the 80s. For me, that was worth the trip. That was the experience. Because I thought that they captured that really well. I thought that everything looked spot on. Not that I was old enough to experience most of that. I mean, I was born in '84. So like once they got up into the late '80s, early '90s, obviously they were within a period that I would remember. But because I grew up with a stepdad, those of you that watch Pixar discussions and other things that we do, Jeff and I, we used Apple together. He brought me up on the early. I think the earliest operating system I used was 7, but I played around with things even a little bit before that because he had some interfaces that let you mess with stuff from even before that and stuff like that.
That's cool.
And so it was really fun to get to go back and see some of that stuff. I just thought that all of the period stuff was really spot on. The fashions looked great. The way people were acting and talking was all great. And that was all really worth it for me. Also, the soundtrack is really good.
The soundtrack, I will agree with you.
I loved,
absolutely.
although there was at least one, if not 2 songs that I thought might have been covers, and I wondered why they chose covers. But anyway, it was kind of fun callbacks to things. Like he talks about how he really early on about how he thinks Dylan is so much better than the Beatles, and then later on we get some Bob Dylan in the movie. Actually, a couple times we get some Dylan, and I thought that was really great. And I don't know, I thought there was a wonderful attention to detail, and I thought that the people making the film had. Again, I think they had somewhat of a reverence for Steve Jobs, but I also think that they had they had a lot of reverence for the history of it, and I thought that the major point of making this movie was to try to illustrate whether they did this effectively or not. I think they did to illustrate how important Jobs' contributions were to just the world we live in, and how you can't overestimate that. Like when you start with the whether you like him as a person or not, and there's a character arc there about also. Like what's more important, building a legacy or building your own personal life? Can you do both of those things simultaneously when you are as big as he is, and also can success make you happy? And that was all in there, and I was really glad of that. Although I'm not sure that it totally pays off by the end.
That was my problem. Was the payoff at the end? I'll say this: at
the end, he goes back to the company, and that's kind of it.
Well, the thing is that they stopped short of so much.
Yeah.
And if we're gonna know the story of Steve Jobs, you can't stop short of all of his ailments.
I didn't think 2000...
That might be a minor spoiler.
No, you're fine.
But they don't go there.
I didn't think 2001 was gonna be the end of it. Like, it opens with a scene in 2001 with him unleashing the iPod.
Well, that's the thing. They didn't even get back to 2001.
No, exactly. But, like, I didn't think that was going to be
98, 99.
But my point is, I didn't think that was going to be the last date we saw the film. When it opens with 2001, I was like, okay, they're going to get to there at some point in the movie, and it's going to be like that kind of nonlinear thing. We're going to tell you where we're headed. And then they never go past that.
I will mention this, something you've said time and time again, and it's absolutely the point here that I was trying to make earlier, is that, like, there's so much great in this movie, but the individual greatness of things in this movie do not a great movie make. And that's where I was feeling low.
Here's what's tough about it. You're making a biopic, and you're making a story that is not just about here's the life of this man, but about specifically here is the story of this man who built an empire.
Right.
And it's not about the story of Steve Jobs, the man. It's about the story of Steve Jobs, the innovator and the empire builder. There's a reason we don't begin with his childhood in this movie. This is not Ray. You see what I'm saying?
Right, exactly.
This is a different kind of biopic.
I understand
and
that.
So I think the problem is with the decision they went with what to make the movie about. There's not going to be a definitive ending, and that makes it really tough as a narrative.
It does.
That's so like. It was unfortunate to me that it ended in such a I thought kind of what's the word I'm looking for? It felt incomplete by the end.
You definitely.
But that wasn't enough to ruin it for me. I don't know that you could have made it in any other way, but it was a little anticlimactic.
Here's the thing. The way the movie is presented for me, I would have liked it a little bit better had they just called the movie Apple.
Yeah, me too. And then and
I would have less of a problem.
Not be complaining about some of the things we're complaining about.
Exactly.
I absolutely agree with you.
If they had called this movie Apple, I would have,
or something along those lines.
Because Jobs and Apple are so intertwined.
You're absolutely right. I didn't like the title from the outset, just because I think it sounds kind of silly. Like, it doesn't immediately invoke, this is a movie about Steve Jobs.
Right.
Like, you can't do the same thing you can with, again, like Ray. You know what I mean? Okay, it's a movie about Ray Charles. That's fine. But like this, Jobs. Like, okay, so what is it? A movie about people going and seeking employment? Like, what is it?
This is about how many people he fired who needed a job.
But I will credit it this. I might be reading in too much into it when I say this, because I don't know if this was intended, but the title could be a double entendre, because it really is a movie about, if not Jobs, the job. It is a movie about your life being the jobs that you do versus who you are.
That's an interesting take.
You know, and also there are all of these people that he has to employ and fire and that sort of thing. And so, yeah, it kind of is a bunch of individual people's jobs. I don't know that they intended it that way. Anyway, I'm going to go with I'm feeling it. I think I like this a lot better than you did. But again, I feel like some of it is... I was pulled through a little bit by getting to go back and re-experience the 80s, and it's such a tough time.
I love that, too.
And you know what? You being such a tech guy, I really thought you would eat some of that stuff up, especially because I was sitting there and I could tell, and I thought this would happen going in. I could tell every now and again I would look over at you, and you would be looking, you would see like big close-ups of like motherboards on the screen and stuff, and I was thinking, he knows precisely what he's looking at, and I don't.
I know a fair bit. I do know a fair bit. Now, don't get me wrong. That's pandering to my kind of thing. Absolutely.
Sure, yeah.
That's one of the major things I liked about it.
I cannot believe the way your sign flipped.
But this is... I went into this to see Steve Jobs' story. I literally wanted it to start with the fact that Steve Jobs was adopted. This is what I wanted out of this movie. And instead what I got is the story of Apple. They gave me some of it and a little background, but I got more of the story of Apple.
Yeah, I think one of my biggest criticisms is probably that because it jumps back and forth so much between personal and professional. You got to do both.
You really do.
But when it
But the driving story here is Apple. Is what I got.
But let me say this: when early on, he finds out that he has a daughter, and he so vehemently, almost violently, refuses to accept that it's his when it's so clear it probably is.
Yes.
And then we skip from mid-'80s.
This was the problem.
To like 1993, maybe even later.
Well, that was part of the montage. We went 93, saw a change out of CEOs. We went 95, saw a change out of CEOs.
Yeah.
We got a little exposition from a narrator.
Right, but my point is, suddenly he has a relationship with his daughter, and I felt like I was missing something.
Oh, we missed out big time. That was one of my big problems.
That is
with
a
this
place
movie.
where the movie is saying, be okay with the fact that we're giving you snippets because it's a biopic, not a fictional narrative. And I much rather, I much prefer a biopic that still works on the level on not fictional narrative, but kind of fictional narrative.
Right.
You know what I mean? Where
I get what you're saying.
Where I can still look at it and analyze it and study it the same way I would story, because it's a story.
But this is precisely the biggest problem I had with this movie, and I'll explain it exactly.
If he was a fictional character, I would have complained about that, and I'm going to complain about it now too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But here's what the montage does. The montage starts at when Steve Jobs leaves Apple. That's when the montage starts. And then the snippets we get are about Apple changing out its CEO, and we get a small snippet of, oh, he started this computer company called Next, and then the next thing we know, we're back at the point where they're trying to get Jobs back to Apple.
Yeah.
And that's why this is an Apple story and not a Jobs story for me. It shows us some about Jobs.
I feel like I'm seeing a difference in who he was, in who he is at the end versus where he was in the middle, but I didn't get to see enough of how he got there.
Yes, exactly. And like you pointed out a huge thing, his relationship with his daughter, Lisa, that floored me that we didn't get anything.
Can I ask you a question? Because maybe you know this. This was something the narrative did not give me. And so I'm not saying that that the movie necessarily did anything wrong. At the same time, again, just looking at it as a story, I don't understand. Why does he name a computer after a daughter that he won't even recognize as his?
I am not entirely sure. There's a story there.
Yeah.
And I'm almost positive I've known it at one time.
But the question...
I couldn't tell you what it is right now.
But then the question, and I would have to look this up, and it's not cool that I have to look it up because I feel like the movie should have given it to me. I want to know if the movie went too far in how vehement he was about refusing to accept he had a daughter. Because that seems really at odds, right?
While I don't know the story... particularly, I don't think they did, because he was an impassioned man.
Yeah,
Don't get me wrong. This movie has moments where it tugs at my heartstrings, big time.
Yeah.
And I'm just going a different direction than you are.
But
You think more of a likable, more of a relatable. I think he's kind of.
Well, I'm just seeing both sides of it.
Right. Basically, I think what it was is something along the lines of, he didn't, at the time, I'm not sure he had a relationship with his daughter, and he wished he had. He was upset. And
but
so
I don't see that in the
his
movie.
Pet project, right.
Is my point.
Right.
In the movie, it's like,
it
I don't even, just don't even talk to me about this girl.
Right.
But here's the problem, though. The issue is, at the same time as he's saying that, that's right around exactly the point that he's naming a computer, Lisa. In fact, he's named it already at the time
and that's his pet project.
Yeah.
It's like the daughter he doesn't have a physical relationship with.
I needed more.
Totally.
Of why. My point is, I needed that internal conflict. I needed that confliction. Because there was no confliction there. It was, no, that's not my problem.
Because they kept his professional and his personal lives almost completely separate for a time until Wozniak kind of gets in the mix.
Okay, let's talk about performances real quick before we end.
Sure.
I was pretty surprised by Ashton Kutcher. I thought he did a great job.
He did do a great job. Yes,
and he's obviously known so much for comedies. People were immediately like, oh god, is that the guy? I thought he looked the part.
He did.
More so when he had a beard than not, because when his beard gets, I don't know if you had this, when he shaves his beard and you see him, I have that transition period where I have to go, okay, he's not Ashton Kutcher,
I can see he shaves his chin, and while we do see pictures of Jobs shaving his chin, they don't have kind of the same jawline going on.
But I mean, once he's completely shaven,
right? No, that's what
I was just
saying.
like, he's Ashton Kutcher.
Well, once we can see the jawline, That's absolutely right.
Everybody was really well cast, though. You get to the
Absolutely.
end, and you get to the credits, and they show you pictures of the real person versus the actor, and you can totally see why they cast him.
Why they cast him that way.
Yeah, I thought all that was really fantastic, and I thought everybody put in a great performance. I really loved. I didn't know a lot of these actors.
I've seen a few of them here and there.
I really liked the guy. I'm not looking at a list right now. I really liked the guy who played the initial investor. I thought he put in a fantastic performance.
That was great. Absolutely, the guy who had worked for...
I'd like to know where he got that scar.
He worked for Intel.
I wonder if the man in real life had that scar.
Are you talking about the guy who worked for Intel or the guy who...
The initial investor. The guy who...
ordered 50 units?
No, the other guy. The
guy from Intel.
Yeah.
Where did you work previously? Well, I worked for Intel. Well,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the initial investor. The guy who gives him $90,000 to start up. Yeah. But anyway, I thought he put in a magnificent performance.
Absolutely.
I really liked the guy who becomes the CEO that used to work for Pepsi. I thought he was really good.
That was some good stuff. Yeah, absolutely. And
there's some really nice intrigue. If nothing else, it was really fun to see the inner workings and the bureaucracy and all that.
It was interesting. But I will say this before we go. I wanted to mention also that this showcases. Not really the diplomacy of Steve Jobs, but his...
well, lack thereof, maybe.
Well, lack thereof. What's the word? I just had the word I was looking for.
Sorry.
This showcases, and I forgot it a minute ago, this showcases his ability to negotiate.
Yes.
His ability to convince to use Del 100, the end user, that they want something. They use this line in the movie that they don't even know they want yet. Absolutely the case, as with the real life Jobs.
Yeah.
He was
How did they know they want it?
He was able to convince someone that you wanted something that he hasn't even thought of what it was himself yet.
Yep.
He's like, well, we got the next model. They don't know that.
I love the moment when he's on the phone and he's talking to someone and he says, "Do you own a TV? Do you own a typewriter? Do you use your typewriter? Yes, great. Okay, now imagining putting them together. Click. I don't need that. Why? If I have a TV and I have a typewriter,
you have your dedicated
why do
devices.
I need something that does both?
Exactly. Yep. And that was before he realized how to sell.
And I think it's also important to have a little bit of historical context when you go back and look at this, because if you're quite a bit younger than us, if you're say 16, 18, 20, you wouldn't have experienced so much of a period, and I'm not sure we did either, but we at least saw a lot of movies about it. Periods of time where you didn't change out technology every year or two or three.
That's right. And also,
if you owned a typewriter, you kind of expected you'd have the same one forever.
That's right. And also the
remember
thing
the moment.
that,
I'm sorry. Remember the moment when he says, "Think of our computers as appliances."
Yes,
that's important.
And for the everyman wants to. Here's the
and doesn't want to have to change them out every couple of years.
Is that the computer at the time was either for someone who was really technically advanced know-how, or was the hobbyist, the kit, and the computer wasn't yet a household term. Mm-hmm. You had your TV, you had maybe, I don't know, the dishwasher, and we just started with the microwave. You had your stove, your oven, those are things you knew.
Was a common term, but it was considered that thing that runs NASA.
Right. Well,
they're as big as our house.
Right, and you're seeing it on TV, but you're seeing the things with the lights, and it's a massive room, and you're seeing those tape reels.
And they pull out tape.
Right. Exactly.
You're thinking of the computers that Adam West had in '60s Batman. That's what you're thinking about.
That's I don't want that in my house. I don't have a place for it. I want to put it in my garage.
And what would I do with it? Because I'm not.
Yeah, I don't want to flip some buttons.
Well, but what's the point? I'm not getting in my car and solving crimes. Why would I need a computer?
Hobbyists would get excited in this period of time. Hobbyists would get excited when they could program a computer to set a bit of flickering lights by flipping switches.
Yeah.
The Altair, I believe the 880, was a hugely successful home computer kit. I wish I had one. I remember when I used to have when I had my Commodore 64. That was great. I could
see you becoming a collector of this stuff, man.
I have a collection of typewriters. Did you know that?
No, I didn't know that.
I have a collection of typewriters. I have a couple of my old computer machines. I have a little bit here and there.
Okay.
Very cool stuff, electronics-wise.
What is the earliest Mac you ever used?
The earliest Mac I ever used would have been at St. Joe Grade School. We had an Apple IIe. And I believe that was also the one, someone's probably going to correct me on this, that ran Oregon Trail. Whatever computer we ran Oregon Trail on.
I know the early Macs
great.
did, and I don't know if it was to be or after that, but yeah, we had Macs at my high school. They did Oregon Trail.
My Commodore 64 had several games, but one thing I liked about it is I had a dual 5-inch floppy drive for that sucker. And I had the cables that would allow me to hook up my cassette recorder to it, because you literally would record programs on a cassette deck.
That's right.
This was great stuff. It recorded on an audio file. Because if you think about it, all electronics is just noise going on. And so you send that out to your tape, it's just going to record that noise, whatever's going on, and you can play it back, that type of thing.
The Commodores, you mentioned,
hugely
were
successful.
were great for games because they could do a lot of things that the like Atari 2600 couldn't do, and had a lot of things that were because it was, I want to say most of it was vector graphic based, or had the capability of doing vector.
Yeah.
Not that it was all based on that, but like it had the best version of Asteroids I ever played.
Well, vector graphics allow for depth of vision in a 2D plane.
Yeah.
It really does, and that's great stuff.
Anyway, none of that had anything to do with the review, but
it's great chance to talk about it.
Yeah, that was really fun. Well, I think we've said our piece on it. Anyway, thanks everybody for watching. Really hope you enjoyed it. We will be we'll be back with you in 2 weeks. We're not going to put out a review next week because I'm devoting all of next week to Spawn Year. Next week is going. This is meta, but next week's going to be Spawn Year week, and then the week after that we'll be right back with you with a brand new movie review. Don't know what we're seeing yet, but we will go see something and review it for you. Thanks as always for watching. That was really fun, Brandon. Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
I'm Captain Logan.
And I'm Brandon.
We'll see you next time. Oh, and sorry about the red. I don't know why we did this. This was not.
That's all right.
This was not planned. Just see us as two floating heads.